now you're doing dances from my generation. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
Whew. It's been a week.
So much is
Yeah.
going on. What is going on?
Right? So much. Should we do our intro before we jump into what is going on?
Yes, yes. Hi, ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial business owner, the founder of Shalo Glow LLC, a handmade shea butter company. I'm your advocate for natural self care and practical business systems.
Hey, y'all, I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and published author who helps you upgrade your self and community care.
Yes, and together we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness.
We love to get together every week and have intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness. Like,
Yeah.
how do we do all these things with all the
Woo.
craziness that's going on in the world?
So much. What? Listen, water, sleep. There's a lot to the list. There's a lot of crazy, and there's a lot of things that I try to do to be intentional about combating it. So let's talk about
Right. And a
it.
lot of grief and loss in the world.
No,
Last week's episode, we were talking about the loss of two of our mentors. We
yeah,
each had lost one.
crazy.
Since the last time we talked, a dear family friend passed away in his sleep from, it was my dad's fishing buddy. Like, it was somebody I grew up with, like somebody that loved and respected, not super close to me, but was my dad's fishing buddy. That kind of says it all.
Yeah,
And so holding a lot of grief and gratitude as we go through this time, like, whew,
yeah.
big time, you
And
know?
I realized that I was undervaluing us going through our wins every week. Every week we meet not only with our Women Connected in Wisdom, but we have our own little group. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I don't think there's space for all y'all in our group. You can't come to Manifestation Mondays. It's only an hour full, but you can come to Women Connected in Wisdom. Okay.
Right.
And we talk about our wins every week. So being focused on how did you win last week, I think has really also helped us keep that front of mind when we're going through all this stuff that we've been going through with everything.
Right. Well, and here in the United States, we celebrated Labor Day on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't meet. And I was telling Shannon before the show, like, totally throws my week off. Like, it's such an integral part of who I am and my work. We meeting with this incredible group of women entrepreneurs that I'm like, wait, what day is it? Who
Right.
is it? What is happening here?
You want the
Because they
receiver.
hold me accountable, right?
I still had to block the time. I sat down to eat. It was 11:30. I said perfect. I would have just got off Manifestation Monday. We right on time.
Right.
To treat it like it was still there so I could continue about my week organized. Yeah.
Yeah, I was toting a college kid back and forth to campus on that
Okay.
day. So my day was completely like we reached we had just gotten back to campus. And thank goodness it's not too far from the house. Like, it's a little too close, honestly, if we're gonna be. I hope she's not listening. I love you, baby girl.
We love
But
it.
we pull up and she's like, Mom, my ID is hanging on the key ring at home.
No.
And I was like, oh, because you can't do anything without your ID. That's your meal plan. She's a freshman, so like you can't get in the door. I'm like, oh, so yeah, that was my Monday.
Before. I had it happen late at night, and I got all the way home, and I had my friend's car keys. I said, "You've got to be kidding me!"
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and it was so cute because she had that intuition, that right when we were getting ready to leave the house, she's like, I feel like I'm forgetting something.
yeah,
And we just dropped her off a couple weeks ago. So I'm not thinking I was like, okay, you got your purse, you
right.
got your clothes, you got I'm thinking, I don't think we'll make that mistake again, but
Hey, and that's the funny thing about life, because you could be so frustrated and it bends you into a bad mood, or you could laugh at it and you're not gonna forget it again, and you could be on to the next thing that you have to learn.
right. I love that you say that, Shannon, because that is such a strategy and a coping mechanism for me, laughter, like looking for the good. In Interplay, we talk about affirmation and looking for the good and looking for what works. And it's not to say that bad stuff doesn't happen, because we all know it does. I mean, you can look at the news for 10 minutes right now and know that, whew,
Not even 10.
there's a lot,
You don't
right?
have to look at it. Just listen to it. Yeah.
Right. Big shout out for my friends and colleagues in New Orleans and Pittsburgh. Like, there's just so much between just everything that, yeah, it's a lot. But today we're talking about spiritual wellness.
Yes.
We're talking about how do we do this. And I know for both you and I, like, the spiritual wellness piece is huge because it keeps us grounded. It keeps us having hope. It keeps us like,
literally, like, that's the key. And it sounds so simple, right? But I was reading, where was I reading? Actually, it was I think it was in The Art of War by Robert Greene. And it was talking about how this prisoner of war camp did not physically touch the soldiers, right? But instead they played psychological tricks on them, so that basically they broke down the team structure, made them only worry about themselves, and then when they got them in that position, made them hopeless. So they didn't give them any of their good mail, right? Automatically and immediately delivered bad news, again, turned them against each other, had them snitching on each other. These are soldiers, so when they got home, it was interesting because they also were more isolated, and the soldiers that reached out less. So the hopelessness is so key. And that's what I look forward to talking about, the spiritual wellness today, because I remember when I felt like the enemy literally told me hope is dangerous. That's what I thought, right? I said, and I thought about it for a while. I said, you can get disappointed. You might get hurt because it doesn't happen the way that you think it should or the way that you want it to. But then being wise, right? Sometimes that's in your favor, that it didn't happen the way you thought it was supposed to. And so hope is really what's helped me get through all of these situations in my life that we're going to write books and all this stuff about, because it's very important.
Right. Well, and what I heard you say in there too is the connection piece. Yeah. Like that the isolation was torture, and that the connection, which we know. I mean, we do Women Connected to Wisdom. We're all about connection and our guests. And you want to read off our spiritual wellness definition before I tell our listeners about our awesome guest today?
Yeah, let's do it. So spiritual wellness allows us to be in tune with our spiritual selves. This realm of wellness lets us find meaning in life events and define our individual purpose. It can be defined through various factors, including religious faith, values, ethics, and morals. Regardless of whether you believe in a particular religious faith, there is always something to be learned about how you see yourself in the world. Yeah.
Love it. Well, I am excited to introduce our listeners to our guest today. She is definitely one of us. She is a business coach, a speaker, an author, a podcaster, which I think she may be our first podcaster on the show. Have we had it?
We haven't yet, but we have some on the way. So
right?
The first of many.
Right? It's it's a fun club to be a part of, I have to say. So Keira is an intuitive, energetic healer and creator. She has created the Awaken program and the Awaken Mastermind programs designed to help leaders learn how to do their own daily healing work and awaken their ability to be leaders of light. She is a creator and host of the Awaken podcast, a show that talks about awakening the greatness inside of each human. I also know from our pre-talk that she's a mom of, I think, 5. And she has this awesome new program that she's going to tell us about that helps women take their idea and create a book and get all the way to publishing. So I want to welcome to the show Keira Poulsen. I hope I said your last name right. So welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. I feel like just listening to you two talk like woke up some energy inside of me, and I'm just ready to jump in.
I love it. Well, when you heard that definition of
Mhm.
spiritual wellness,
Yeah.
what bubbled up for you? Because I know this is your jam. This is what you do. So what bubbled up for you?
I mean, just the whole time thinking, how have I never heard this before? This is so good. Yeah, the spirituality part of my life it's a non-negotiable part. Like it has to happen. And I'm so deeply grateful for it because it has grounded me. It has awakened my gifts. It has allowed me to be an entrepreneur that I would have never been before. And that all roots from me taking time with spirituality, with my inner self and connecting to the divine. So it's all the things that I love so deeply.
Right? Do you have a daily practice that, and sometimes guests like to share that or they don't, but is there some like for our listeners, is there something that you do every day that makes a difference?
Yes, I do not miss my sacred space. And this is the core of everything I teach. So, all my programs, all my masterminds, I have a whole training on how to create sacred space because it is so important in my life. And I watch that it roots everybody who I work with. So, my practice, it ebbs and flows. I like to throw new things in to keep it exciting, but the two things that are always the same, or I guess the three, is that I always spend time in prayer. I always spend time in healing. So I do healing work in my chakras, and I always spend time in gratitudes. And there's a bunch of other things I like to throw in. I love to chant. I love to do EFT. I love to spend time with my future self and like my visions and my goals. But those are like kind of like the sprinkles. The core is those main three.
Right. Now, this is a very logistical question, but
Mhm.
sometimes we have listeners that are new
Yeah.
to spiritual practices or they're new to creating. How much time do you, because we're busy women, all of
Yeah.
us, like,
Mhm.
and it may ebb and flow, this may too, but how much time do you put in your planner? That's my shout out to my co host Shannon, who is a planner. How much time do you block out for this?
Well, I'm going to tell you how much time I do, but that's not how much I suggest people start with. So I definitely spend an hour every morning in my sacred space, and it is because I have a lot on my plate. Like I have 5 children, and I run a publishing house, and I run a coaching business. And if I am not spiritually grounded, my nervous system is on fire. And so it's that hour is my deepest self-care. And so I get up way before my children do. And if I can't wake up, the minimum requirement for me is 20 minutes because that's how much it takes to do those top 3 things. But on most days and hours where I go. Now, when people are just starting out, I suggest 10, just 10 minutes, because it's so easy to look at that and say, I can give 10 minutes of my day. And we just kind of baby step into a practice.
I love that. And who was it that said if you don't have time to meditate for 30 minutes, meditate for an hour? It's some kind of quote like that. I'll have to, right? I'll have to look it up and put it in our show notes. But it's some kind of quote that if you don't think you have time to meditate for 30 minutes, you need to be meditating for an hour or prayer or whatever your practice
Yeah.
is, right? That it is a keystone. I know both Shannon and I have keystone practices that keep us going.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the time block that you said, the hour, absolutely. And you know what? If my body needs something and I need to actually rest, then 20 minutes. And I've been working on time management, especially since COVID, right? We had all the time to ourselves. Okay, my question was, how are you managing your time as well as your money? So I see the same blocks automatically. So I'm happy that I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have so many things I want to ask you about, Keira, because I'm so excited that you're here. But I had several friends recently, just this week, talking to me about publishing books. And I was like, oh, you got to listen to the show this week because we have somebody that has a publishing house coming on. So, way broad question, but tell us about that.
I'd love to. It's one of my favorite conversations. So my publishing house is called Freedom House Publishing Co. It is a publishing house for women. And I believe that there's power when women gather and speak truths. And so there's so much power when women write books that I believe are divinely inspired written books. So these books that we publish are self-help in nature, they're spiritual, they're healing. The requirement is that they must add light to the world. If they add light, then they can publish with the Freedom House.
I love that so much. One of my clients had just reached out to me and said something about the book that Spirit was downloading for her and that she needed a publisher. And I was like, I think I got a publisher for you. So I'm going to be sending her your way because she definitely adds light into the world. And I love that requirement. Must add light into the world. Now, are you a hybrid publisher? How does that work?
So what I do is I have trained a publishing team. So everybody who publishes with Freedom House gets their own publishing specialist. That's a very hard word to say. But what happens is that then we have this system, because with 5 kids, I've learned everything has to be systemized in my world. So I have a system that you upload all of your work to the system. You give us everything. We literally show you everything we need, and then we take it from there. And we get your book formatted, and we get covers made, back covers made. We get everything up to standard requirements, and then we upload you to Amazon. So everyone who publishes with us gets up on Amazon, which is the best printer fulfillment out there. And I love it. It's just such a joy. Something I see that happens is that woman who publishes with us, they feel like they were divinely guided on these messages. And for many, these messages stayed in their hearts for a while. And they kept trying to quiet them or be like, someday I'm going to write this. But what happens is that the message gets heavier and heavier, and the inspiration actually starts to weigh them down. And when they choose to publish it, like share it with the world, it's pure liberation. And so I call our publishing house a house of freedom. It liberates our authors and it liberates readers, because light liberates. And so there's just so much joy in this work. And we have 4 books being published this month that are just powerful forces in the world. So it's just such a joy.
I love that so much. We will link to your publishing house so folks can find you and they can get hooked up to you. Shannon, you look like you had a question.
You know, I love books. So I love the light part, right? Especially because I think we actually know we didn't get to talk about it. The name of my company is Shalo Glow, right? So I always think about the light and tying in. It's not just about self-care. It's about you as a person. What about you? Let's talk about that. You know, that's why I love this podcast. So I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing for women. And I need to look at this book list because I'm excited about it. But questions, Jess. So what made you start a publishing house, and what was that process like?
So at the very beginning of my journey, when I would say it was an awakening, I had all these trauma memories show up, and it just tore me to the core. There was no more ground, like the ground had fallen 1 billion times. And it opened this new space inside of me. And in that place, a book showed up. And I never, ever thought I was going to write a book. But the divine literally just like wrote this book for me. And as I was writing this book, I heard very clearly in my spiritual ears that I was to start a publishing house. I was like, what? But so I did. And so I researched how to do it. And I had all the time in the world. Really, I didn't have a business. And so I just like met with lawyers and set up copyright and did all these things. And then it just like sat on the back burner for like 3 years. I just never even thought of it. And then I got really into coaching leaders, women leaders. And as I began coaching them, every one of them was like, I have a book. How do I publish it? And I was like, I have a publishing house. Let's figure it out. And that is how really it birthed, was from pure inspiration. And then a few years later, like I just was thrown into the fire and figured it out. And now we have this really amazing system that makes it easy.
I love that story. You know, one of the things that stands out to that story about me, for me especially, is that you listen to your intuition, you listen to that spiritual voice, and then you let it kind of be until the time was right. Like you had an easy focus around it. And then when the time was right, you were like, boom, here we go. Well, I love that.
That's a question. Did you have easy focus around it? Or was it, oh my goodness, I started a publishing house and I'm not doing anything with it. God gave me this message. What am I doing? Or what was that like? I know sometimes I have to fight with myself, you know?
Yeah. Well, I had so much going on. I started this coaching business and I had written and published a book. And so it was just like, I had so much focus in other areas. I would every now and then have this feeling like, that's so weird that God inspired me to start a publishing house. Like nothing happened with it. And so there were times that I just doubted that inspiration. Like, well, and there was this moment, I forgot about this, where I got the bank statement that said my business bank account for this publishing house was down to $14. And I just thought, I'm just going to close this. Like, I don't know why I was inspired to start this. And there was this very distinct, like, no, you don't. You go put $100 in that bank account, Keira. And I did. I went, I threw $100 in. And the whole time I was like, this is so silly, but whatever. And it was 2 months later that I published my first book, which was one of the women I was coaching. So, yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah. That is such an awesome story. Now, where did your podcast come out of?
So my podcast so everything I do is just divinely inspired. Like I don't do anything unless it comes to me from what I feel like is the divine God, like telling me, showing me. And I had this like crazy like desire, like I am to start a podcast. And I kept thinking, I don't know how to do that. That feels too hard. And so I kind of would pray about it and I just let it go. And then one day I had this thought, like, I think my parents' assistant has started a podcast. So I told my parents, for Christmas, can you hire your assistant to start a podcast for me? And sure enough, on Christmas Day, that was their gift. And about 6 weeks later, the first episode was born. So it's just been such a joy. I love podcasts.
Yay, Mom and Dad. That's awesome.
Good, healthy Christmas presents, you know?
Right?
That help us build stuff. I love it. Yeah.
The other thing that stands out for me about that, Keira, is asking for what you want.
Yeah, that's too.
Like, I love that. Like, what? Such a gift. Like, that is fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about your podcast, because, you know, podcast listeners love other podcasts. So give a little shout out for your podcast and what you talk about. And
you know, it's been 2 years, so it kind of has ebbed and flowed. But I would say the main theme is just awakening to inspiration, awakening to the creations inside of you, which is like awakening greatness. And so a lot of it is actually just me podcasting by myself. I spend a lot of time in prayer and just asking to receive messages, and then I podcast. And then if someone shows up that just lights my soul up, then I bring them in. And also anybody who publishes with Freedom House, I actually interview them on my show. So we have a lot of authors coming in, telling their stories, telling their messages. I do have a lot of the women that I coach get on and share their work. There's something about women who are in divine creation, who are co-collaborating with the divine, that just really is my space of just joy and happiness. And I love to listen to their stories because I think that they wake up inspiration for those who listen. So it's kind of what you find there.
I love that. And it's called
just the Awaken
The
podcast.
Awaken Podcast. Okay. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes for that for sure. Yeah. And it can be found on all major podcasting platforms, right? Okay. Yeah. So when y'all are listening to Women Connected in Wisdom and liking and subscribing, because that's a thing that helps us, pop on over to the Awaken Podcast and do the same thing. Yeah. So we can be connected and support each other for sure.
Thank you.
So what is a project that is just lighting you on fire right now? What do you have going on?
So much, all the time. I think I'm a bit of a manic creator. Like when I create, and it doesn't just come out in one form. It's like litters, right? So right now I just launched a boot camp that is super affordable. It's like $37. You jump in, you get to learn how to clarify your message, how to write your book, how to take it and put it into courses, just all the little tiny pieces that I teach in my big programs. It's like the taster level. So I launched that last week. And then yesterday, the doors opened to my brand new mastermind, which is called Awakening Authors. And this mastermind is fire, like so much fire. The support that I put into this, I've hired an accountability coach who meets with everybody on their own every week. We've got these powerful calls, and I teach women how to receive their books spiritually, but then also how to take that message and put it into an extraordinary work of light. So creating your courses from the message in your book, launching a podcast, creating a coaching business, truly creating a successful business so that you can make a difference in the world. Because if you have a really powerful message, but you don't have a successful business, you have to go get a job doing something else. And that's a tragedy.
Right. I love the work you're doing in the world.
Thank you.
Our friend, Brandy Lee, who is also an author, we all just kind of circle around each other. And she is one of our podcast listeners, and she's just catching us live today. So Brandy, we're so glad you're listening. And we need to have Brandy come on the show. She's got a great new book out. So I'll send you that invite, Brandy. Keira, it's so aligned with what we do here on Women Connected in Wisdom about lifting up each other and getting these messages out and lifting up voices. And I love that.
Yeah. It's how we change the world. Like, this is our effort. There's so much pain and sorrow and suffering everywhere. And one of the things that I see happen as I work with women who are very empathic, because they're healers, they're light leaders, they're shamans, like these women are here to change the world, but the suffering, it actually distracts them and it can pull them down. And so what I try and teach is we can have massive compassion, but if we get distracted by the sorrow in the world, we stop being light. And so we have to focus on our purpose, our message. And as we do, and we lift it and we share it, that's how we make a difference right now.
Whew. Can you say that again, Keira? Because I need to hear it again. Like, I don't know if our listeners do, but I need to hear that again. Like,
well, what I find, it's like one of the hardest things is I coach these women and they've all been showing up just like so pulled down in darkness and just so inundated with the news and the suffering. And what happens is they've been inspired to write books. They've been inspired to be thought leaders, but the suffering distracts them from their purpose. And it's like weird. It adds to the collective suffering. So what I do is I invite them to actually come back to their vision, come back to what they were inspired to do, and then move forward in action, because that is what's going to change the world. When we all rise up in our light and start sharing it, that's when things get to shift.
Whew, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I really needed to hear that this week. I mean, I've been holding a lot of grief and loss. And, we have to walk through some of that, especially when it's personal. But boy, you are so right. It's distracting. Like I was telling Shannon before the show, I've lost a set of car keys. I've lost a debit credit card. And I know it's a symptom of my grief and loss. And it's the fact that I'm distracted. And so you even saying those words to me personally today, I'm like, whoo. I don't know if they were for our listeners. They were for me, but I'm so glad everybody got to hear them. Yeah. Did you need them too, Shannon?
I'm taking notes. This is why I'm here. I know other people will listen after, but I'm here for the live conversation, taking notes like a student. But no, definitely. And I love, of course, the owner of a publisher house would come through with the publishing house with the verbiage to be able to articulate things so eloquently, right? But that's exactly what I was talking about last week. I struggle with everything that's going on in the platforms that we have. I don't want to minimize anything by not posting about it and not being, current and aware of things that are going on and always talking about positivity, because that's not healthy either. We have to be realists, but I also don't want my feed to be another newsreel. So that means I have to say no to some things. And that's something that I go back and forth with. But again, if I'm serious about my mission and I feel led to do these things, I've prayed to work only with people who I'm aligned with, and we've been working. So it looks like it's aligned, and we're building amazing things. Then me saying no to that, just like, Keira taking an hour for herself before her 5 children, is so that we can go do all of those things. So thank you for the reminder that I'm not crazy and it's okay. It's healthy to do it this way, because it's difficult to hold it there sometimes with everything that's going on.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
All right. I just have to know, what time do you have to wake up in the morning to get up before 5 kids?
5:30.
All right. That's not too bad. It's not too bad. Yeah. I like to get up early too, Keira. Like I was raised on a small farm. So like I'm an early bird by my nature. My rule is, though, if it's before 5, that should be illegal. So 5:30, like you're okay.
Before 5 is still nighttime. We don't
No. We had this huge thunderstorm roll through Atlanta last night, and it was 1 a.m. in the morning, and just like these powerhouse booms, like, I mean, waking everybody up. And I was telling my walking buddy who I walk with in the morning, I said, I just don't function between usually 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. Like I don't function, and I'm a very highly functioning person. But I used to tell when I was a social worker and I would have clients, then I'd be on call all the time. I'm like, if it's an emergency, please don't take it personal. Like if I don't know who you are in the middle of the night, like tell me, give me all the statistics, because I just really shut down at night. That's my hope, at least. So
yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm the same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I value that sleep and that part of our wellness. So
much.
Right?
Yeah, it's really important. And it is tricky. I'm finding now that I have teenagers, the only time they want to talk to me is at 10:30 at night. And I'm like, oh, guys. But it's like I crave that time because it's the only time they really will drop in and talk. So,
I can't tell you how many amazing conversations I had with my daughters, who are now grown, right when I was like just about to fall asleep. Like I would shut, and they'd knock on, hey, Mom. And there was a tone of voice or there was a thing, and I'm like, oh, this is a big one. I probably wasn't functioning during those conversations, but it wasn't about me. It was about me just listening, right?
Yeah. So true.
That listening piece. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm actually, I told you, Christine, reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yes. And it talks about how communication is the number one skill, right? And there's different levels of communication. We can read, write, speak, and listen. And a lot of times we're trained in all these other 3 categories, but the listening, we didn't sit through 3 years of that in school. So different types of listening to understand, listening to respond, and how that changes the dynamic of the conversation. So I hear what you're saying, but I love how, as moms, you ladies have that perspective of patience with your children and holding space. Like, this is what we do for the people that we care about. And you show up as you are, I show up as I am, and it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it and love the memory. I love that.
So true.
You know, I just took Sammy back to college and this weekend, and I am a scheduler and a planner because I have to be, you know, run my own business, do this podcast, like all the things, right? And I'm like, hey, we have 5 weeks until fall break. So do we want to put a lunch in there? Do we want to put, oh, I don't know, mom, let's kind of go with the flow because I may want to come home for the week. It's such an interesting time of transition, right? I was thinking about that, about when I left home. And you know, it's that it kind of takes me back to, you know, when kids are really little, you know how they'll run ahead of you and they'll turn and they'll look back to see where you are. And Kira, I'm not sure the ages of your kids right now, but you know that stage, and they and your little brother Shannon, like how they run, they look to make sure you're there. It kind of feels the same way with this 19-year-old. Like she's like, I'm out of here, but hey, are you still home? And can I, you know?
Well, that's so special, though.
Right? It really is. It really is. Yeah. Shannon, how was it for you when you left home?
It was interesting. So after I left home, my dad moved like I don't even know if it was 2 weeks later. I said, you moving? What is going on? Where's my flute at? I'm still looking for my open hope flute, okay? And so it's an interesting conversation, and that's why we really talk about the wellness and being set up, you know. So I think about it. People go home. I was an RA on campus, so I was helping the freshmen transition to campus. They would go home for the holidays, and I would still be there just because my dad was moving and stuff. So it's kind of different. But now, you know, thinking about connection in different generations, and you know, of course, we've been talking about grief and loss. My dad was sick with cancer too. They took his stomach out when I was in middle school, high school. So just the fact that he was there, it's like, you know what, let me think about what I want this to look like in the long term. So I need to get set up. I'm at school. I was completely focused in that because that was the only thing that I had thought about doing. You know, so we talk about women and choices and purpose and everything that we spend our time on. Where did the ideas come from for the possibilities that you think about yourself? You know, we're told stay in school. So I was staying in school, and I graduated that with honors too. So we would talk, and he would come up there. I was working, he was working, and it kind of stayed like that. But that's also how the house was. You know, I grew up with my dad. I didn't grow up with my mom, which is also why women connected in wisdom is so important. It's important in real life. You know, this is real life. So I love college, but it wasn't necessarily as back and forth. And, you know, I was looking forward to the future with optimism and excited to be in college and have that period of my life as a woman before I get married with kids. I can enjoy waking up at 5:30 in the morning after I do whatever I want to do with all 24 hours, you know? So that's how I took it.
I love it. Yeah. And as you were saying that, I just saw a vision of you with your planner too. Yep. Keira, Shannon is a master planner, and she's an organizer. Like she just, it's her jam. And so I just see a young Shannon with her planner and being an RA and just keeping everybody organized. I love that.
And it's so interesting because being in those roles also taught me the things that I wasn't doing. You know, when I was a manager, at Papado, my boss one day, we had a one-on-one, and she told me, Alicia, she was a general manager. She said, you know, you hold everybody else to a higher standard than you hold yourself. And I said, ooh, ouch, right? And I do hold myself to a high standard, but I wasn't committed. I was eating whatever I wanted. I wasn't drinking water. I wasn't working out. I said I was going to do all this stuff and didn't do it, you know? So planning, sure. But in college, sometimes I still wouldn't wake up on time. So looking at the discipline, what do you want for yourself? You know, where do these ideas come from? What are you gonna do about that? What are you gonna do with your life? So that's what I was doing in college. I reminded the freshmen, hey, college experience is not gonna come find you in your dorm room. You better get out here and enjoy yourself while you're here. So
Right.
yeah.
Boy, I think that's a lesson we can all take, isn't it?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you talk about awakening greatness, Keira, like I love that when I was looking at your website and I was listening to your podcast, like when you talk about awakening greatness,
Yeah.
I know you can't do it in 3 steps. Maybe you can. Maybe your program can. But what do you tell, like, where do we start? Where do we start with that?
So I just believe seeking is the first step. That was the beginning to my whole journey, is that I had really lost myself and I had fallen into this place where I didn't know even what I liked. I didn't have a passion for anything. I was just alive. And I just was like, this isn't what I want. So I just began to pray. I began to seek, like, show me my purpose. And the seeking led to a horrible breakdown, but the breakdown led to this beautiful, expansive life I live now. And so, yes, pain is always involved when we choose to expand. When we choose to wake up our greatness, we have to like break, because it's like mud gets packed on our bodies. And so think of it, if your arm was stuck in mud and you wanted to break it, it kind of hurts a little bit. And that's how I feel like when our greatness starts to expand, it breaks us and pain happens. But if we can heal through it, if we can continue to seek and ask for ideas, creations, inspirations, and then take action, I mean, greatness follows, because you're stepping into the realm of faith and bold actions on things that you were inspired to do. And it's just so fun.
I love that.
I love it.
Like that. Oh, yeah.
And I will say that's true for me too, right? We have the book, Girl, Wash Your Face. I said, hey, I have this in my journal, things that lie. Let me write my book, the lies that I believed about my life. And that's actually how I lost the weight. I started the Daniel's fast. I said, again, I'm committed to everybody else, committed to work, committed to friendships and relationships. But what about God? Isn't he a jealous God? Let me make sure I have my priorities right. So did the Daniel's fast, through that, lost weight. And again, it's with the spirituality and the focus on taking care of myself and prioritizing self-care in a healthy way. That is why Shaylo Glow is a company, why we're talking on a podcast. And, I'm not thinking, oh, well, this is not what my degree is in. But instead thinking about how everything actually sets you up for that. I love the way it falls together. It's a really good movie. I feel like in everybody's life, so I love that you're helping people share their stories, Keira.
Well, it's a joy. And I do love to point this out, because I think my story breaks a lot of ideas, right? Like, I never went to college, went to massage school. I had a phenomenal, 20-year round in massage therapy, but I never went to a day of college. But I do believe in what I'm here to do. And that means that when the ideas come in, there's never the thought of like, oh, I'm not qualified. It's like, how do I make it happen? And that's all that's really required, is like the gumption to just take action, even if you aren't fully qualified.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that, because it's so true. Like we put ourselves in boxes, or we put ourselves in, oh, I don't have this, or I don't have that. Or somebody asked me one time, I can't even remember what I was doing. I was doing something wild and crazy. And they said, by whose authority are you doing that? I was like, mine, because I can do it and I know how to do it and it needs to be done. Like, it's very interesting. Like what I'm hearing from both of y'all in today's conversation is also just about listening. Like that, listening to that guidance, listening to what am I doing next? What is, I think that's powerful. This weekend, I had a conversation with a friend who's working on a self-care project that's kind of being downloaded. And she was like, hey, I'm looking for an artist. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. And she's like, do you have time to do that? I go, no. I said, but what I do know is I've been wanting to make more time for my art. And I love, Shannon knows this, Keira, but I love when things stack on top of each other. And so I was like, oh, I can collaborate with you. I can put art making in my calendar for a work project, and I get to create art. Like win, 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 win. And so that's what I did part of what I did this weekend was create like all this art that was like, wow, whether she'll use it or not, who knows? But I had so much fun. And it also makes me think when you said that about it came in, you set it aside, and then it was used later on.
3 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens a lot with most inspiration. And we think, oh, if I was inspired to do this and it's supposed to be really successful right now. But the truth is like the inspiration shows up, and then we just have to ask for the next step and ask for the next step and trust the timing. Like I would not have been able to build a whole system and train publishing specialists 5 years ago. I had no business technique whatsoever. I didn't even understand systems or funnels or anything. And now it's like, of course I had to be on the sideline until I was ready to really create it to be what it needs to be.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I always say divine timing.
Yes.
Like it is when the time is right, it's going to happen. And it's like a lot of times I laugh with some of my clients because, they're like, you see all these people that look like overnight successes, right? They look and you're like, yeah, they've been working at that for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Like, and yes, sometimes there are overnight successes, but one of my favorite music groups are two sisters out of Atlanta, Rising Appalachia, and Leah and Chloe, where I think it was 2 years ago, Rolling Stone was like, great new artists to watch. Well, we've been watching them for 15 years, y'all, in Atlanta. Like, they've been doing gigs, they've been showing up, they've been putting their work out into the world. And then, yes, for their success and people seeing them. But I think that's true for all of us, like listening and putting our passion and our purpose out there and just going for it.
Yeah. And I think it's having the courage to pivot too. Like, oh, if I was doing this for 5 years, does that mean that this was all a waste? No, you have everything you need for the next level, Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I was thinking about when you were talking, Keira, is I love something that helps me, gives me courage, is that God qualifies the call. So unqualified by whose standards? Because this person said you need a piece of paper with some scribbles on it. Listen, it's Corona, and that is somewhere in a garage, somewhere packed up. Okay, I got it, but what are you doing with it? So absolutely, I hear what you're saying, and I think that that's part of the beautiful story of the differences. Is look how all these women, with their wisdom from different places, can change the world because they decided to open their mouth and work together. So. That's something else with our identity and the value that we give ourselves, like with the titles and how we pair them with, again, how we feel about ourselves. A lot of people have been struggling with their job titles, and because the spiritual aspect might not be as strong, that's where they get their identity and the anchor from. But when it slips, your value is not different. Today, yesterday, today, and forever, God is the same. So if he loves you and you're valuable and all this stuff, then that's true no matter if I'm a server or a kitchen manager. This person might talk to me different because my uniform is different, but that's them and not me, So remembering that you're qualified. I love that.
No, that's so beautiful. That gave me goosebumps.
Thank you.
Keira, every week we do what we call a wisdom in action, where we talk about if you had to have a hashtag about spiritual wellness this week, what would your hashtag wisdom in action be?
Share your light.
I love that. Share your light. Shannon, what would yours be?
Okay, so I want to make sure I have the rules right. Is it, this is the honor student, right? Is it a hashtag or is it like the action that we're actually doing?
It can be either, my friend.
Oh, okay, perfect. I love it. So what I'm doing this week is being disciplined in the time. It's important to not let it slip. So I've been prayed one day, did devotion one day. I need to for the rest of the week. Let's get it back on track and make sure that we're doing that so it doesn't affect the rest of the day.
I love it. I am going to get up a little earlier because when I'm in my jam and I usually take about an hour to an hour and a half to really do my sacred space. And I've been slipping a little, to be honest. I've been hitting that snooze button. So, Keira, you've totally inspired me this week to be like, yeah, it is worth that hour. It is worth that 5:30 a.m. wake up call, and to be more grounded because I've definitely been off my game. So, so that's going to be mine this week is to rededicate to myself and that self time. So, Keira, I have so loved our conversation today. Thank you so much for being here. Do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to impart on our listeners before we pop you back in the green room?
Before my kids come knocking at my door, I'm like worried they're going to get home 5 minutes early today. Honestly, my biggest call is that if you have this in your soul, like that there's a message in you, like that you have a work to be doing and you've been trying to quiet it, or maybe you've tried it and you feel like you failed. That's something that stops a lot of leaders, is that you don't ignore it any longer, that you give it some oxygen, like bring it out, breathe into it so that the world can experience it. Even if it's a small little thing you throw up on Instagram or something you speak out loud to someone, or you write your book, just bring it through and it will liberate you.
Thank you so much for being here. We will put all the links to your stuff in our show notes for our listeners to find you. And I just have a feeling we're going to be connected. We're going to continue to stay connected, and we'll be paying attention to your work and your podcast. And I hope you'll come back and chat with us at another time too.
This was so fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Grateful for you. Talk to you soon. Oh my gosh, that was good.
So good.
What bubbled up for you listening to Keira?
Okay, let me see. Let me look at my notes. So I love how she said she does creation in litters. I just watched Cruella, so I'm thinking about the 101 Dalmatians, right? But, like, that's how I feel. I want to do this and that and this and that, and oh my goodness, all the variables that it takes to do that.
Right.
So I definitely heard her when she said that. I love it's a non-negotiable part that the spiritual is true. You can let it slide. Sure, go a week without doing your stuff and see how you start reacting to stuff and the timing and everything else, like you said.
Right. See how you lose your debit, credit card, and your keys like all in the same week. Hello.
I love how she said spend time with my future self. So I think my past self sometimes for putting stuff in the right place. Thank you so much for putting this here. I have it in my bag. Spending time with my future self is something I'll do. And yeah, everything, how the inspiration starts to weigh you down if you don't let it out.
And that was powerful, wasn't it?
Right? Absolutely.
That was powerful. And about sharing your light, like that if you've got this inspiration, if you've got this idea, that like get it out there.
Yeah, like literally I stepped down from, and we specifically talked about saying, you know what, where am I going? What do I want for myself? What do I like to do? What are my hobbies? What brings me joy? When I stepped down from being a salary manager, I realized I didn't know the answer to those questions. I said, where do all my answers go? Like, why do I not know this about myself? I know this about my best friend or my partner, but where is Shannon at? And I really had to tap in and figure out who she was and where she was and what she wanted to do and, what happened and what she thought about that, and reprogram all of that stuff. But again, what is the anchor? What is the code that you're building the whole computer and system around? For me, it's been the spiritual wellness and having a healthy identity that way. to be able to do everything else.
You know what I really noticed too is when Keira was talking about, the breakthrough can be painful,
Yeah.
and there can be a breakdown with the
Yeah.
breakthrough. And I meant to say it to her, but one of my teachers, Brene Brown, and her TEDx talk, same thing happened to her. Like it was like there was a breakdown before hitting the authenticity and the sharing of her greatness with the world. And I think that is so powerful. Like that if we avoid the hard parts, or if we avoid what could be potentially painful as we go to level up and share our greatness, then we don't get to the other side, right? And what I love about what we do and what Keira does and the work we do in the world is you don't have to do it by yourself.
Right.
Like you do it in community, you do it connected. You don't have to, I mean, those pain points can be scary or they can be hard, but you can have somebody holding your hand while you do it. Because that's what women do for each other is we lift each other up and we make it easier,
And I love the, just like having a coach in your business or when you're working out. Now I'm already ready for teenagers who want to talk at 10:30. I knew this was going to happen. I knew this 28 years ago, thank you. And now I don't have to, now I feel like I'm more prepared to go into it, So even in conversation that just strikes up and you hear the details, that's what I love about being connected in wisdom and in truth. Like she said, that's very important, to be authentic. So we're not just telling stories and they didn't happen or didn't happen that way. So we're not portraying the lesson, really being honest. Like, I don't know where my card is right now.
Right.
What do you do? And
I need some divine inspiration for that. Like my mama used to, I think it's Saint Joseph. I can't remember who the patron saint of lost things is, but I'm gonna call on him out loud on this podcast today to help me find this debit credit card before I have to replace it. So
I definitely believe in the Holy Spirit. I just ask, where is my phone at, Lord? And I promise you, under 2 minutes every time.
Serious spiritual wellness. Well, my friend, before we say goodbye, give a shout out for our sponsor.
Absolutely. So Shalo Glow, the handmade shea butter company we started off talking about. Ladies, don't forget that it is September 8th today. So you have more than enough time to get your nomination in for your Shea Row. That's going to be somebody in your life, your community, who's made a difference in your spiritual wellness or just in general and the different dimensions that we go through. Shaylo Glow is going to take care of a free gift of self-care for her. We do have new scents and everything coming out. So if you're interested in things like that, make sure that you follow us so you can know what she's going to get. And that nomination that you're going to send it to shayloglow@gmail.com with the subject title, My Shayro, and we will put her in the nomination for the running for a free gift of self-care. Yes.
Thank you so much. And thank you. And all our listeners, if you don't know, what is the coupon code for our listeners?
Yes. So for wisdom, Women Connected in Wisdom, if you're listening and want some Shaylo Glow, use WISE5 and you will get 5% off on your next order. So we're about to switch over containers. I've told you ladies a little sprinkle about the different sizes. We have a lot of stuff coming. So the glass is going away. The lemongrass scented sugar scrubs and oil is going away. So if you love it, use your 5%. Come and get it now before we run out and go to the next for you ladies.
Yes. Thank you. Of course. Thank you for your work in the world, my friend. And thank you for this awesome conversation today. I look forward to this time together every week. And thank you for everybody who was listening. And reach out to us. Reach out to us on social media. Give us a like and a subscribe. And we appreciate you.
Yes. And we'll see you here next Wednesday, live at 5. And in the meantime, be well, be wise, and be whole.